Hello and welcome to Whispers in the Dark, where secrets long buried in the shadows are awakened by the coldest truths. Today, I invite you to travel back with me to the year 1996, to a small mountain town in western Montana. A peaceful place, where people didn't lock their doors at night, where kids played outside until the sun went down, and where everyone knew the name of the neighbor across the street. But that summer, something shattered the calm. A young girl was murdered. A family was torn apart, and a case plunged an entire community into fear, a mystery that would remain unsolved for nearly 3 decades. Sarah McLain was 18 years old and had just graduated from high school. She was the kind of person everyone loved, kind-hearted, always smiling, quiet, and deeply connected to nature. Sarah lived with her mother and younger brother in a small wooden cabin on the edge of town, near the forest. She loved hiking and taking photos with her father's old film camera, a man who had passed away in a work accident a few years earlier. On July 15, 1996, Sarah told her mother she was going for a walk down to the river to snap a few photos before the sun went down. It was one of her favorite places, the Flathead River, calm and clear, winding through tall grass and open meadows. She packed her backpack, her camera, and a journal. Sarah never came back. Early the next morning, a fisherman stumbled upon a haunting sight. Sarah's body was found along the riverbank, not far from a public campsite. Her clothes were torn, showing signs of a struggle. Her face was bruised, and there was dried blood in her hair. There was no murder weapon at the scene, no witnesses, and no signs of robbery. Her wallet, camera, and belongings were all still there. The autopsy report confirmed that Sarah had been strangled. Tissue was found under her fingernails, clear evidence that she had fought back. But in 1996, DNA technology was still in its early stages, and the sample wasn't strong enough to yield a complete profile. One of the first officers on the scene would later say, "I'd never seen anything so heartbreaking." That girl, she was just starting her life. Police began narrowing down a list of possible suspects: former classmates, strangers spotted near the campsite, hikers passing through. One name came up more than once: Douglas Hale, a man who lived about 3 miles from the scene. He was known to fish in the area and had once been accused of harassing a woman years prior, though no charges were filed. Douglas was brought in for questioning. He claimed that on the afternoon of the murder, he had been in his cabin, alone, with no one to confirm his alibi. He insisted he had never met Sarah and hadn't gone near the river that day. Though detectives were suspicious, they had no physical evidence or conflicting testimony to hold him. Reluctantly, the police let him go, and the case went cold. The town fell silent, a chilling, uneasy silence. Sarah's family kept her bedroom almost exactly as it was for many years. The photos she had taken, trees, skies, her little brother's smile, still hung on the walls. Every morning, her mother sat by the window, looking out toward the trail that led into the woods. She never gave up hope that one day she'd know what really happened. In an interview, she once said, "I don't need to see someone go to prison. I just need to know why my daughter died, and who made it so she couldn't come home." By 2005, the case was officially labeled a cold case, meaning there were no more leads to pursue. Still, the DNA found under Sarah's fingernails was preserved in deep storage, along with a few other pieces of evidence. Authorities held onto the hope that one day technology would be advanced enough to speak the truths that people couldn't. The town slowly moved on. A new generation grew up. But the pain remained. In the mother's eyes, in her brother's quiet memories, in the sound of wind rustling through the pine trees at night, as if whispering a reminder: someone out there still knows. Someone killed Sarah and has been living an ordinary life among those who never suspected a thing. Nearly 3 decades later, something unexpected happened. A cold case unit decided to reopen the investigation, and this time, science was on Sarah's side. In November 2023, in Helena, the capital of Montana, the State Police Cold Case Division began revisiting a number of unsolved cases. Among dozens of thick case files, one name stood out like a wound that never healed: Sarah McLain. What made this case particularly compelling was that the evidence still existed. Items collected from the scene, including strands of hair, dried blood, and most importantly, skin cells found beneath Sarah's fingernails, had been carefully preserved in cold storage for nearly 30 years. Detective Claire Redding, who led the team, shared in her report, "Honestly, we weren't expecting a miracle, but today's science, it's like a high-powered flashlight shining into the darkness of the past." Back in the 1990s, DNA technology was limited. Investigators needed high-quality, intact samples, something not always available from real-world crime scenes. But by 2015, a breakthrough arrived. Investigators could now analyze trace DNA, tiny degraded samples, using a method called next-generation sequencing. More importantly, thanks to expansive genealogical databases, including those from companies like GED Match and Family Tree DNA, law enforcement could compare DNA to a suspect's relatives. Sometimes, just one distant cousin uploading their genetic data out of curiosity was enough to trace an entire family line. After more than a month of analysis and cross-referencing, in late December 2023, a result appeared on the lab screen. The DNA under Sarah's fingernails had a strong match to a woman named Linda Hale, living in Oregon. Linda had no criminal record, but when investigators reviewed her family tree, one name immediately jumped out: Douglas Hale, her ex-husband, and the man who had once been questioned back in 1996. Douglas Hale, a name almost forgotten. At the time, he was cleared as a suspect due to a lack of evidence and a seemingly solid alibi. No one had spoken of him in years. He had moved away from Montana, living in Washington state for 2 decades, working as an HVAC technician and keeping a low profile. But now, DNA wouldn't let him hide any longer. On March 12, 2025, 2 detectives from the Spokane Police Department, working alongside the cold case team, knocked on the door of Douglas Hale's apartment. He was 59 years old, living alone, and looked frail due to heart disease and diabetes. The conversation lasted about 45 minutes. Douglas denied everything. He claimed he had never met Sarah McLain and insisted he'd been home the entire day of the murder. When confronted with the DNA evidence, he appeared confused and said, "I don't know anything about that. I don't understand what you're talking about." The detectives didn't arrest him. They needed a warrant. But Douglas's demeanor, a mixture of anxiety, confusion, and resignation, raised red flags. Just a few hours after the interview, Douglas was found dead in his home. A neighbor had come to check on him after he didn't return phone calls. There were no signs of foul play or toxins. The autopsy later concluded that he had suffered a stroke brought on by high blood pressure and heart failure. But the timing was too eerie to ignore. He died just 4 hours after being questioned again about a murder from 29 years ago. During the autopsy, investigators collected a DNA sample from Douglas and rushed it to the lab. 1 week later, the results came back. A 100% match to the DNA found under Sarah McLain's fingernails. Douglas Hale, the man who had slipped through the cracks nearly 3 decades earlier, was, without a doubt, the one who killed the young girl on the banks of the Flathead River in 1996. No one knows his motive. No one knows if he and Sarah had ever crossed paths before. It might have been a random act of violence or a chance encounter that turned into tragedy. Now he was dead. No confession, no trial, not even a tear of remorse. When Sarah's mother received the news, she simply said, "I've waited almost 30 years to hear that name. And now, I can finally let her rest." Douglas Matthew Hale was born in 1965 in Missoula, Montana. He was the only child of a working-class family. His father was an HVAC repairman, and his mother worked as a cashier. Neighbors described Douglas as a quiet kid, kept to himself, and usually alone. He was an average student, not involved in sports, no close group of friends. After graduating high school, Douglas took on various jobs, waiting tables, driving trucks, and eventually working as a refrigeration technician, the job he stuck with the longest. He got married in 1991, but the marriage lasted only 4 years. His ex-wife, Linda Hale, said in an interview after the case broke, "Douglas wasn't violent. but there were dark sides to him. He'd often wake up in the middle of the night and go walking for hours. I once saw him burning old photographs. I had no idea who was in them. No one ever imagined Douglas could be a killer. But now people began to wonder, how long had he been living a double life? As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered long periods of unexplained gaps in Douglas's past. Years he seemed to drift through small towns across Montana, Idaho, and Washington. No rental records, no formal employment. He'd simply disappear, then resurface somewhere else. In 1996, the year Sarah was murdered, Douglas had lived just a few kilometers from the crime scene. He had been questioned at the time after being seen near the river, but vanished from town just weeks later. Detective Claire Redding later said, "He always seemed to know how to stay in the shadows, never close enough to be caught, but never far enough not to feel unsettling." One of the biggest unanswered questions remains. Did Sarah know Douglas? Or was this a completely random attack? Some believe the two never met, that it was simply a cruel coincidence, a girl walking by the river and a man with bad intentions crossing her path. Others suggest a more disturbing theory, that Douglas had been watching her, possibly even obsessed. During the search of Douglas's apartment after his death, investigators found an old notebook. Inside were blurry photos of young women taken from a distance. No names, no notes. It's unclear whether Sarah was among them, but the discovery raised concerns about a potential pattern of stalking behavior. Once Sarah's case was closed, another chilling question emerged. Was Sarah McLain his only victim? Investigators began combing through dozens of cold cases involving missing or murdered women across the Pacific Northwest from 1990 to 2010. A few stood out. A 17-year-old girl who went missing in Idaho in 1998, last seen walking alone near a lake. A 29-year-old woman found murdered in Washington state in 2003, just 5 miles from where Douglas had worked. None of these cases were ever solved, and all occurred within proximity of places Douglas had once lived or been employed. There's no direct evidence, yet, connecting him to those crimes. But the files are now open again. Criminal profilers have categorized Douglas as a low-frequency predator, someone capable of living an outwardly normal life, blending in with society, never raising alarms, until opportunity presents itself. They often don't kill multiple times, but they carry deep obsessions or repressed rage. Maybe Douglas killed Sarah in a moment of rejection, or perhaps simply out of a desire to control. But afterward, instead of repeating the act, he retreated, disappearing into a quiet, uneventful life. That's the scariest kind of killer, one expert said, because you'll never know. You could have passed him on the street, shaken his hand, even hired him to fix your air conditioner, and never suspected a thing. Douglas is dead now. No confession, no explanation. The police may never know what really happened by that riverbank. Why Sarah? What did they say to each other? Was it premeditated, or just one dark moment that changed everything? We know who, but we may never fully know why. Sound effect, soft camera click, like a memory frozen in time. Now Sarah McLain's file has a name attached to it. Her family can finally engrave one final line on her headstone. The truth is known. But the shadow Douglas left behind, the unanswered questions, the possible other victims, still lingers in the memory of those cold, quiet mountain towns. On March 25, 2025, the Montana State Police held a press conference to announce the findings in the Sarah McLain case. A spokesperson confirmed, thanks to advances in DNA technology and cooperation with national genetic databases, we have identified the suspect as Douglas M. Hale, who lived in the area near the crime scene in 1996. Almost instantly, the decades-old case made headlines across the state and the country. Sarah McLain's name appeared in the news for the first time in 29 years. Social media lit up with comments and shares. Many were shocked that a case so long forgotten finally had closure. Janet McLain, Sarah's mother, was now 68, living alone in the same house where it all began. When a reporter asked how she felt, she replied with a single quiet sentence. "I've waited almost 30 years for this answer. But at what cost? My daughter still isn't coming home." Janet never left the town. She kept Sarah's bedroom just as it was, untouched since 1996. The photos Sarah took with her old film camera were still neatly arranged on her desk. The jacket she wore the last day she was seen still hung on the back of the door. There were days when Janet would sit by the window for hours, watching the breeze move through the path that led into the woods. Each autumn, the falling leaves carried a nameless sorrow. Now, with justice finally served, however late, she said, "At least I don't have to imagine all the terrible possibilities every night. I know his name. I know what happened. I don't have to live with questions anymore. Now I just live with the memory." Tom McLain, Sarah's younger brother, was now 40. A quiet man, he rarely spoke about his sister. But after the news broke, he posted on social media alongside a black and white photo of Sarah, smiling brightly. His caption read, "She was taken from us, and for years I blamed myself for not being able to protect her. Now we know who did it. But the pain doesn't go away. Justice doesn't bring peace. It just helps me start forgiving myself." The small town where Sarah once lived, now home to just over 1,000 people, was shaken. Residents still remembered that day in 1996, when police cordoned off the woods and news of an 18-year-old girl's murder spread like wildfire. She had worked part-time at the local bakery, tutored a neighbor's child, helped an elderly woman carry groceries at the market. Sarah was never the loudest or most noticeable, but everyone knew her and everyone remembered her. A former neighbor said on local television, "It's terrifying to know the killer lived among us." And even more heartbreaking to realize, all those years, he was free, while her family lived in the dark. Many praised DNA technology for finally bringing justice. An online fundraiser was created to support Montana's cold case unit, with the message for the truths still waiting to be told. Families with missing loved ones began sending letters to law enforcement, hoping that their case might be the next one to be solved. In the darkness of grief, a light flickered, faint but undeniable. Sarah, though gone, became the reason others still held on to hope that they too might find the truth. On April 7, 2025, the McLain family held a small memorial at the local cemetery. Sarah's grave was updated with a single new line etched beneath her name. "Now you can rest. We know the truth. There were no crowds, no cameras, just a few close friends and relatives. They laid a wildflower on her grave, the same kind Sarah had once photographed years ago by the river. Sound effect, a gentle stream flowing, a soft camera shutter click. For nearly 30 years, a family lived with unspeakable pain. A community lived with questions that had no answers. And a young girl, frozen forever at age 18, became a symbol of the quietest kind of sorrow, being lost, with no one knowing why. Now the whisper from the past has finally been heard. The truth has come to light, but for those left behind, the memory never dies. This is the question that investigators, legal experts, and victims face every day. Does justice still matter if it comes too late? In Sarah's case, the suspect was already dead. No apology, no trial, no questions, and no answers. Some would say, at least we know the truth. Others might say, real justice comes with accountability, and he never faced a single consequence. So where is the line between delayed justice and incomplete justice? When someone is murdered, the victim isn't the only one lost. Sometimes the family, friends, and even an entire community, they become victims too. For 29 years, Sarah's mother lived with a wound that never healed, not because it was too deep, but because no one ever closed it. The truth came, but time had already taken so much. Her brother's youth, her mother's hope, and the years Sarah should have had, going to college, falling in love, starting a family, or simply living. Justice can't turn back time. It can soothe the pain, but it can't erase it. The sorrow remains, like a shadow that never quite fades. There's no denying it. DNA technology has become one of the most powerful tools for solving cold cases. Hundreds of once-forgotten crimes have been cracked open thanks to genealogical databases. But with that power come ethical questions. Should people's genetic data be used by law enforcement without clear consent? Does a distant relative, someone you've never even met, have the right to unknowingly put you on a suspect list? And how much should justice rely on biology alone? Sarah's case opened a door to hope, but it also forced us to face a new reality. Technology isn't just a solution, it's a test of our trust and our privacy. Sarah's story has an ending, but thousands of others are still floating in time, victims still missing, killers still walking free. Maybe your neighbor, your co-worker, or someone you passed on the street. And families waking up each day with the same quiet question: where is my child? What happened? Delayed justice is still justice, but forgotten justice, that's the second crime. Sarah's case reminds us of something important. Never stop searching for the truth. Her mother, for nearly 30 years, lived with no answers. But she never gave up. Investigators, even when the trail seemed cold, reopened the file. And finally, the evidence spoke. Sometimes, hope isn't the belief that things will get better. Sometimes it's simply the decision not to give up, even when no one knows when the light will come. You've just finished Whispers in the Dark, a special 5-part series called Delayed Justice, telling the story of Sarah McLain. A case that was cold, in both time and emotion, but also a chilling reminder that the truth always finds its way to the surface. Thank you for walking this journey with us. If you believe stories like these deserve to be heard, please share this podcast, leave us a 5-star rating, and let us know your thoughts. And if you're carrying an untold story, your own, your family's, or someone who's been forgotten, don't hesitate to reach out. Because maybe, just maybe, a whisper in the dark is all it takes to bring the truth to light. We'll see you next time on Whispers in the Dark.